His name is Adam, and I've known him for as long as I can remember. My older brother Andy's best friend. Adam was always a regular guest in our home. The two of them were practically inseparable. They played sports together, helped each other with school, and went on family vacations every summer when we'd head to the lake house. He was a few years older than me, and though I'd always thought of him as just another brother, we'd never had a real connection. He was always just there, close yet distant, like any friend of Andy's. I never saw him as anything more. Adam was always just Adam. Cheerful, open, sometimes a little reckless, but always a loyal friend to my brother. I'd watch them laugh together, tease each other, and lift each other's spirits when things didn't go their way. Adam had never paid me any particular attention, and I never sought it. To me, he was simply my brother's friend. And that was that. It was simple, easy, without any hints of anything more. But one crisp autumn evening, everything changed unexpectedly. He stopped by our house when Andy was still on his way home from work, and I was in the kitchen making tea. It was late, night had already settled in, and I expected my brother any minute. Adam stepped inside, his jacket damp from a light drizzle, his face showing a slight hint of weariness. "Hey there," I greeted him with a smile, watching him take off his jacket. "Andy said he'd be back in about half an hour." "No problem, I'll wait," he said, glancing at me briefly. But his eyes lingered on mine a second longer than usual, and suddenly my heart began to beat a little faster, as if that glance carried something new, something I couldn't quite name. I turned back to the stove, focusing on the tea, trying to shake off the strange feeling that came over me. But I could feel his gaze, a warm presence that stayed with me. I wanted to know what he was thinking, why his attention had suddenly shifted toward me. "How have you been, Lily?" he asked unexpectedly, his voice warm with a gentleness I hadn't noticed before. "Good," I replied, a bit surprised at his question. "Just busy with work and keeping up with things." He nodded, giving me a small smile, and walked over to the living room, leaving me with a mix of emotions. My mind kept trying to downplay his tone, his gaze, but for some reason I couldn't ignore it. I felt something awakening inside me, something I'd long kept hidden. Over the next few days there were more of these small moments, our eyes meeting just a second too long, a quiet warmth in his words, a subtle kindness in his gestures. One evening the three of us were watching a movie, and I accidentally brushed my hand against his on the armrest of the sofa. I felt a quiet thrill run through me. He glanced at me quickly but didn't move his hand away, and in that simple touch, I felt a spark that made my heart race. Soon we began exchanging messages, just light-hearted jokes, hints at old memories and casual updates on our days. But each reply, each word he wrote, took on a greater meaning. I was struck by the thought that he was messaging me for no reason other than to talk, that we shared a secret connection hidden from everyone else, especially my brother. Our short conversations turned into brief walks, usually when I knew Andy was busy, and those walks became something special to me. We'd stroll through fallen autumn leaves, talking about everything and nothing, sharing thoughts or just walking in a peaceful silence that felt somehow intimate. It became clear that I couldn't hold back my feelings anymore, that they were becoming a part of me, and maybe a part of him too. One evening, just as the sun was setting, we were by the lake in the park. The trees cast long shadows over the water, turning it into a deep blue stillness. Suddenly, he looked at me in a way he'd never looked before, and I felt as though an invisible thread was pulling me closer to him. I didn't want to resist it any longer, and it seemed like he didn't either. "Lily," he said softly, my name barely more than a whisper, but filled with a warmth that made my heart stop. He reached out, his fingertips gently brushing my hand, and that soft touch made everything else disappear. We stood there in silence, caught in this delicate moment, and I felt that our silence held more meaning than any words could. Then slowly he leaned in, and his lips met mine in the softest, gentlest kiss, like the touch of an autumn breeze. It was so quiet, so tender that it felt like a dream, but within that dream there was more truth than I'd ever known. After that evening I couldn't think of anything else. We messaged each other more often, each message charged with anticipation and hidden meaning. Our walks turned into regular meetings, each one filled with a sense of quiet secrecy. I knew we couldn't tell anyone about what was happening between us, especially not Andy. Yet each time we were together, I felt that our secret made these moments even more precious. Still, as deeply as I felt for him, I began to feel the worry growing inside me, the worry that one day everything would come to light. How would I ever be able to look my brother in the eyes if he found out? How could I explain that I couldn't resist the feelings that had come out of nowhere, but had quickly become the most important part of my life? Every time I thought of the possible consequences, my heart would clench with fear. But when I was with Adam, I could forget all of that. I could lose myself in his smile, in the warmth of his touch, in the quiet, gentle kisses that had become our unspoken promise to keep this story just for ourselves. The weeks that followed felt like a secret I carried close to my heart, a hidden part of my life that nobody could know about. Adam and I found ways to meet, carefully, thoughtfully, almost as if we were creating a world that only existed when we were together. It was both thrilling and terrifying, knowing that we were balancing on the edge of discovery every time we were close. But the feelings were too strong to ignore, and with each meeting, the walls between us continued to dissolve. One rainy afternoon, I found myself thinking about him in a way I hadn't expected. I was walking home from work, my umbrella barely holding up against the wind, when I saw a message light up my phone. It was Adam. "Hey, are you free to meet?" His message was short, but there was something about it that filled me with warmth despite the chilly weather. We hadn't planned to see each other that day, but I replied quickly, "Sure, where?" He suggested a small cafe tucked away from the main street, one I hadn't been to before. I changed course, feeling my heart beat a little faster with each step, a soft blush creeping over my cheeks. I wondered if he could possibly feel the same anticipation and joy as I did. When I arrived, he was already sitting at a corner table, looking up as I came in. Our eyes met, and in that single glance, I felt the thrill of knowing that he was waiting just for me. "Hey," I said, smiling as I slipped off my coat and sat across from him. His eyes softened as he looked at me, and we both fell silent for a moment, letting the quiet cafe, the scent of coffee, and the soft murmur of other patrons wrap around us. "How was work?" he asked, as if this was the most natural thing, as if we weren't carefully keeping this connection from everyone else. "It was fine," I replied. "But this is better." I hesitated, realizing how much I'd revealed, but he only smiled, his hand brushing against mine on the table, as though checking if I was really there. "I think about you all the time, you know," he admitted quietly, glancing away for a second. His words sent a wave of warmth through me, both surprising and deeply comforting. We talked about everything that afternoon, about our weeks, our hopes, even silly memories from childhood. Somehow sharing these ordinary details felt extraordinary, like we were building something real and precious between us. As the rain continued outside, the hours slipped away until the evening crept upon us. When we finally parted, he walked me to the door and took my hand, holding it just a moment too long. There was no need for words. I felt his fingers wrap warmly around mine, and when he let go, I felt that familiar ache of missing him, even before we'd said goodbye. In the days that followed, we found ourselves weaving our lives together even more. We began sending each other photos of random moments, funny things we saw on our commutes, little snippets of our day-to-day lives that we would never share with anyone else. Each message was like a thread binding us closer, a reminder that even when we were apart, he was there and I was on his mind. One weekend, when I knew Andy would be out of town, Adam and I planned a longer day together. We met at a park a little way out from the city, a place we'd chosen specifically because it was quiet and far from anyone we knew. It was one of those crisp, clear autumn days, the air fresh with the scent of falling leaves. As we wandered along the path, he reached for my hand, holding it gently, our fingers lacing together as if they belonged that way. I looked up at him, feeling a mixture of joy and disbelief. There he was, looking at me with that same warmth, that quiet depth I'd never known before. I wanted to freeze this moment, to somehow capture the way his hand felt in mine, the way his smile seemed softer when we were alone. We spent hours together, wandering through trails, laughing, talking, and at times, simply walking in silence, letting the moments speak for themselves. Near the end of the trail, we found a small clearing overlooking the lake. The water sparkled under the sun, calm and peaceful, mirroring the quiet connection between us. We sat on a bench, and I rested my head on his shoulder, feeling utterly safe. "Lily," he murmured after a long pause, "I keep thinking about how unexpected all of this is." He turned to look at me, and there was a hint of wonder in his eyes, as though he couldn't quite believe we were here together. I looked up, meeting his gaze, and smiled. "Me too. But I don't want it to stop," I whispered, barely able to admit it out loud. He leaned in, brushing a soft kiss on my forehead, and I closed my eyes, savoring the warmth of that gentle touch. His arm wrapped around me, and for a moment, it felt like the world had narrowed down to just the two of us, to the rhythm of his heartbeat and the quiet breath we shared. As we sat together, hidden away from everything else, I thought about what this meant, what we were becoming. Part of me was worried, knowing that what we had wasn't something we could explain easily, especially to Andy. But there was another part of me, one that felt free and alive in a way I hadn't known before. I wanted to hold on to this feeling, to savor each moment, even if I knew it couldn't last forever. When the afternoon turned to evening, we lingered by the lake, reluctant to say goodbye. He looked at me, his eyes filled with something so deep and sincere that I felt my heart ache. In that moment, I knew that he felt the same way, that this was more than just a fleeting connection for him too. But as we walked back to the parking lot, reality started to creep back in. He glanced at me, his expression thoughtful, and I knew he was thinking the same thing, that what we had couldn't stay hidden forever, that eventually Andy would have to know. The thought of it filled me with a nervous tension, a quiet fear that whispered of the risks we were taking. Yet, as we stood by my car, his hand still holding mine, all those worries faded into the background. I could feel the warmth in his gaze, the way his fingers tightened around mine as if he didn't want to let go. He leaned down, his lips meeting mine in a gentle, lingering kiss that felt like both a promise and a question. We pulled back, our faces still close, and I could see the same conflict in his eyes, the same longing that made it hard to walk away. I knew that what we had was fragile, that the boundaries we were crossing could change everything. But as I looked into his eyes, I felt a quiet determination take hold. For now I would savor each moment, each stolen glance and quiet embrace, no matter where it might lead us. And so we continued, meeting in those hidden corners of our world, where we could pretend, even just for a little while, that nothing else mattered but us. But in the back of my mind, a question lingered. How long could we keep this secret before everything came to light? And when that moment came, would we be able to face it together? The days turned into weeks, and every secret moment I shared with Adam felt like something stolen from time itself. It was a delicate dance between reality and the dream world we had created for ourselves. A world where it was just the two of us, unburdened by the expectations of those around us. But no matter how much I tried to stay present, to simply enjoy what we had, there was always that lingering worry, a quiet whisper that reminded me we couldn't keep this up forever. The tension between wanting to be with him and the fear of being discovered gnawed at me constantly. But when I was with him, everything felt right. Our secret moments together were like bursts of sunlight breaking through a cloudy day, filling my heart with a warmth I hadn't known I was missing. One evening, Adam texted me, "I have something special planned. Meet me at the park tonight." My heart skipped a beat as I read the message. There was something so thrilling in the spontaneity of our meetings, the way he could turn a regular day into something magical. I quickly dressed, trying to calm the fluttering in my stomach, and made my way to the park. When I arrived, it was already dark, the moon casting a soft silver glow over the trees. I spotted Adam waiting near the entrance, a soft smile playing on his lips as he saw me approach. His eyes seemed to sparkle in the moonlight, and I couldn't help but feel that familiar rush of excitement wash over me. "I have a surprise for you," he said, taking my hand. Without another word, he led me deeper into the park, away from the well-trodden paths and into a small clearing surrounded by trees. There, under a canopy of twinkling fairy lights that he must have set up earlier, was a small picnic laid out with blankets, pillows, and a lantern flickering softly beside it. "Adam," I whispered, stunned by the effort he had put into this. "This is beautiful." He squeezed my hand, his eyes searching mine. I wanted to do something special, somewhere we could just be ourselves away from everything else. There was a tenderness in his voice that made my heart swell. He led me to the blanket and we sat down, the quiet night enveloping us in a cocoon of peace. We talked for hours that night, sharing stories we hadn't told each other before, laughing at silly memories, and even sitting in comfortable silence, letting the stillness speak for us. At one point he pulled me closer, wrapping his arms around me as we lay back, looking up at the stars. I could feel the steady beat of his heart against my ear, and for a moment, I let myself forget all the fears and worries that usually plagued me. "I've never felt like this before," he said softly, his voice barely more than a whisper. "I don't know how to describe it, but being with you, it's like everything makes sense." I turned to look at him, my heart racing at the sincerity in his eyes. "Me too," I admitted, my voice trembling slightly. "But what if we're found out? What if Andy?" I couldn't bring myself to finish the sentence, the thought of my brother's reaction too painful to fully imagine. Adam was quiet for a moment, his brow furrowed in thought. Then he gently brushed a strand of hair away from my face, his touch so tender it made my chest tighten. "I don't know what will happen, Lily, but I can't regret any of this. Being with you, it's worth whatever comes. He paused, searching my eyes. "I don't want to lose you." The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken promises. And in that moment I knew there was no turning back for either of us. I leaned in and our lips met in a soft, lingering kiss, the kind that felt like it could last forever. I lost myself in that kiss, in the warmth of his embrace, letting the rest of the world fade into the background. But reality had a way of creeping back in when I least expected it. The next morning, as I made my way to the kitchen, my phone buzzed with a message from Andy. "Can we talk? It's important." My heart dropped. Something in his tone, even through text, sent a wave of anxiety through me. Was this it? Had he found out? Trying to calm myself, I texted back, "Sure, I'm home. What's up?" Andy arrived not long after, looking more serious than usual. We sat at the kitchen table, and I tried to steady my nerves as he took a deep breath. "Lily, I don't know how to say this, but I've been noticing things lately. You've been acting different, distracted." He paused, searching my face for answers. "Is there something going on that I should know about?" For a moment my mind raced, trying to come up with something. Anything that could explain my behavior without revealing the truth. But before I could respond, he continued, "I saw Adam's car parked near the park last night, and I thought I saw you with him." The room seemed to spin, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure he could hear it. "Andy, I started, but my voice failed me." He leaned back, rubbing his hands over his face in frustration. "Lily, please. Just tell me the truth. Are you seeing Adam?" I opened my mouth to deny it, but the look in his eyes, that mix of hurt and betrayal, stopped me. I realized then that I couldn't lie to him, not anymore. The words came out in a rush, quiet but steady. "Yes. I'm seeing him." The silence that followed was almost unbearable. Andy's expression shifted from confusion to disbelief, and then to something that looked painfully close to betrayal. "How long has this been going on?" he asked, his voice barely more than a whisper. "Not long," I said quickly, though it felt like a lie even as I said it, because in my heart, it felt like it had been forever. Like Adam had always been there, waiting for me to notice him. "We didn't mean for this to happen, Andy. It just did." He shook his head, standing up abruptly, the chair scraping harshly against the floor. "I trusted both of you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. I thought you were my friend, Lily, and that Adam." He broke off, unable to finish the thought. I reached out, but he stepped back, shaking his head. "I need some time," he said, turning away. "I don't know if I can deal with this right now." I watched him leave, the door closing behind him with a finality that left me feeling hollow. Tears blurred my vision as I sank into the chair, trying to catch my breath. In one moment, everything had shattered. The secret world Adam and I had built had come crashing down around us. And now all that remained was the wreckage. I wanted to reach out to Adam to tell him what had happened, but my hands trembled too much to type. Instead, I sat there in the empty kitchen, wondering if what we had was truly worth the price we were about to pay. And as I sat there, alone with my thoughts, a painful question hung heavy in the air. Had we been too foolish, too selfish to think we could keep this hidden forever? After Andy found out about Adam and me, the days seemed to stretch endlessly, filled with an aching silence that settled over the house like a heavy cloud. Each morning, I woke up hoping that the argument with my brother had been just a bad dream. But every time I came downstairs, I was greeted by the cold reality of Andy's distant gaze and the oppressive silence between us. The easy warmth that used to fill our home was gone, replaced by an unspoken tension that neither of us knew how to break. A week passed in this suffocating atmosphere, each day bleeding into the next with a dull sameness. Andy and I barely exchanged words, and when we did, they were clipped and formal, about groceries, the laundry, or when he'd be coming home. It was as if we were strangers living under the same roof. The house, once filled with laughter and the comfort of family, now felt cold and unwelcoming. I tried to distract myself with work, throwing myself into projects that would keep my mind occupied. I started staying late at the office, volunteering for tasks that no one else wanted. The endless hum of keyboards and phones provided some relief from the turmoil in my thoughts. But even there, surrounded by colleagues, the ghost of Adam's smile, the look in Andy's eyes when he confronted me, haunted me like shadows I couldn't escape. When I returned home, the silence was almost unbearable. I would sit in the living room, mindlessly scrolling through my phone, hoping for a message that never came. Adam's name remained at the top of my chat list, our last exchange frozen in time, but I didn't dare reach out. I couldn't bear the thought of what might happen if Andy discovered that Adam and I were still talking. One evening, desperate for some air, I decided to take a walk through the city. The cold autumn wind bit at my cheeks, and I pulled my coat tighter around myself, hoping that the chill would somehow numb the ache in my heart. The streets were busy with people going about their lives, their laughter and chatter feeling like a distant echo from another world. A world where everything was normal, where I wasn't constantly looking over my shoulder. As I wandered aimlessly, I found myself drawn to the small park where Adam and I had shared so many secret moments. The leaves had turned golden, blanketing the ground in a warm russet carpet. I stopped by the old bench where we used to sit, and for a moment, I allowed myself to relive the memory of his arm around my shoulders, the warmth of his breath as he whispered my name. But the memory was bittersweet now, tinged with the fear that I had lost him forever. Trying to shake off the melancholy, I walked further into town, passing by small shops and cafes. On a whim, I stepped into a little flower shop. The scent of fresh blooms was comforting, a brief respite from the cold, harsh reality outside. I bought a small bouquet of yellow tulips, flowers that had always symbolized hope to me. But as I carried them home, they felt like a mockery of the hope I was struggling to hold on to. When I returned home, the house was still empty. I placed the tulips in a vase on the kitchen table, their bright color standing out starkly against the dimly lit room. But they brought me no comfort. I couldn't escape the gnawing emptiness that had taken root in my chest. The next few days were a blur. I buried myself in mundane tasks, cleaning the house, reorganizing my closet, trying anything to keep my mind from spiraling back to thoughts of Adam and the broken bond with Andy. I even tried to return to hobbies I had long forgotten like sketching, but even that felt hollow. Then one evening I received a text from Andy. "I'll be late tonight. Don't wait up for me." The message was short and personal, but I couldn't help but read into it, searching for any hint of how he might be feeling. I wanted to reach out, to somehow repair the damage, but I didn't know how to bridge the chasm that had grown between us. I spent that evening alone, curled up on the couch with a book I couldn't focus on. The house was too quiet, the emptiness suffocating. And that's when I heard a knock on the door. My heart leapt into my throat as I went to answer it, half hoping, half fearing it would be Adam. And there he was, standing on the doorstep, his eyes filled with worry and exhaustion. The sight of him took my breath away, and for a moment I couldn't move, couldn't speak. "Lily," he said softly, stepping forward. "I came as soon as I could. I couldn't just leave things like this." I stared at him, a whirlwind of emotions crashing over me, relief, fear, longing. "Did Andy talk to you?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He nodded, his expression pained. "Yeah, he came to see me. He's hurt, Lily. He feels betrayed by both of us." Adam looked down, running a hand through his hair. I tried to explain, but nothing I said seemed to make a difference. He just kept asking how I could do this to him. Tears filled my eyes as I listened, my heart breaking all over again. "I never wanted to hurt him," I said, my voice shaking. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen." Adam reached for my hands, holding them tightly as if he were afraid I might disappear. "I know, but we can't change what's happened. The only thing we can do now is figure out where we go from here." I looked into his eyes, seeing the same anguish that had been gnawing at me for days. "What are you saying?" I asked, my heart clenching with dread. He took a deep breath, his gaze never leaving mine. I don't want to lose you, Lily, he said, his voice filled with a quiet desperation. But I don't know if we can fix this without giving Andy the time he needs. We might need to step back for a while, to let things settle. The thought of pulling away from him, even for a short time, was like a knife twisting in my chest. But I knew he was right. We had rushed into this without thinking of the consequences, and now everything was falling apart. Okay, I whispered, my voice breaking. We'll take a step back. But promise me this isn't goodbye. Adam leaned in, his forehead resting against mine, his breath warm on my lips. This isn't goodbye, Lily, he whispered before pressing a soft, lingering kiss to my lips. It was a kiss filled with all the things we couldn't say. A promise that, despite everything, he wasn't ready to let go. For the next few days we kept our distance. The silence was agonizing, but I knew it was necessary. I tried to give Andy the space he needed, hoping that somehow time would heal the wounds we had caused. But each day felt like an eternity, and the house felt colder than ever. Then one evening, as I was preparing dinner, the door creaked open and Andy walked in. He looked tired, worn out, but there was a softness in his eyes that hadn't been there before. Lily, he said quietly, standing in the doorway. I've been thinking about everything. My heart pounded, hope and fear battling inside me. Andy, I'm so sorry, I began, but he held up a hand to stop me. I know you are, he said, his voice softer now. And I don't know if I can fully forgive you yet. But I don't want to lose you, Lily. You're my sister. Tears filled my eyes as I nodded, a glimmer of hope breaking through the darkness. It wasn't a full reconciliation, but it was a start. And as we stood there, the faintest hint of understanding in his eyes, I allowed myself to believe that maybe we could find a way forward. I didn't know if Adam and I would find our way back to each other, or if Andy would ever fully accept us. But for now there was a fragile truce, a small flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, we could rebuild what had been broken.